Ray Symonds, education is not a gift. Education is not a gift. Ray Symonds.
How many of you feel that you have been given a good education? Go ahead, raise your hands, but please be honest. All of you that have your hands raised right now, congratulations. You're part of the problem. Chairman Bob, fellow Toastmasters, and anyone who just did or did not raise your hands, education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. I'm the first generation of my family to go to college. I enrolled, and 4 years later, they gave me this. And on it read, the University of Massachusetts, Boston. How many of you have heard of that school? Put your hands down. UMass Boston is not a school that people hear about. It's just a school that should logically exist. I want you to imagine another Ray. Preferably a slimmer Ray. And his says Harvard. I don't need to ask you if you've heard of that school. Who do you think's better educated? Real Ray or slim Harvard Ray? We know the answer. But what you may not know is that both Rays would have studied under the same professor, Cheryl Nixon. Cheryl Nixon was a professor at Harvard because for her, professor at Harvard looks pretty good. She was a professor at UMass Boston because she loved teaching and she loved students. Many of the students at Harvard believe they've already achieved their education simply by getting into Harvard. 70% of the students at UMass Boston worked full-time jobs and took classes in their spare time to improve their life. Professor Nixon was a very influential teacher to me. I took every class she offered at school. She had an open door office policy, which meant if her door was open, you should go in. I abused this policy. I would come running in after class. Professor Nixon, what about Gatsby? What about Hamlet? What is Faulkner even talking about? She would calmly tell me to sit down and smile at me, and she would say, what do you think? Under her, I realized that my education was my own responsibility, and it was up to me to achieve that. Professor Nixon was an English professor, but she taught me a lot about what it means to learn. Let's take a step back. My father didn't go to college. In fact, he barely even graduated high school. But he was an educated man. Not a doctor or a philosopher, a fisherman. Not far out of Boston Harbor, there's a collection of rocks known as Norman's Woe. Norman's Woe is famous for the number of ships that are wrecked there. Every fisherman in Boston knows you don't fish Norman's Woe. Every fisherman, of course, except my father. He made it his goal to learn those rocks and how to fish them. Since everybody was smart enough not to fish them, he had to be his own teacher. Through the years, it cost him a lot of gear, and he gained the reputation of a madman, or a fool, or a foolish madman, depending upon who you ask. But that barely literate, foolish madman turned his knowledge of the sea into the opportunity for each of his 6 children to go to college. 5 years ago, my father went out to fish Norman's Woe, and he didn't come back. For him, this would read, graduate, North Boston High School. That's it. But his life would say that he had earned a PhD on the open sea. These days, I'm a teacher myself. We just finished midterm exams. So of course, I heard a lot of this. Oh, teacher, you're so handsome! Teacher, teacher! Take a look at me. they believe it is my job to give them this. So it's good if I like them. I try not to teach that way. I try and make my classroom into a mutually supportive and positive learning environment. My principal, whenever he talks to me about classes, uses all the buzzwords. He wants creative lesson plans that empower students through critical thinking skills. And then, at exam time, I'm given a pile of paperwork to fill out, detailing what a perfect answer looks like, with specific point deductions for mistakes. Because of course, this has to be as standardized as possible. I know not all of you are educators here, but we came here today to be educated. We've learned a lot from each other, but mostly, we've learned a lot by doing things ourselves. Even if you have no interest in joining the education system, in 30 years, when you are retiring, or already retired, this generation of students will be running the country. And if you like the idea of that government thinking this is the highest level of achievement, no problem, don't do anything. But if that idea scares you, and I think it should, it, like your education, is up to you to do something about it. So, stand up, say something, make your voice heard. It's time we stop celebrating this and start celebrating us.